Welcome. This is Karen Harrison, and welcome to June Reiki Call. My website is www.karenharrison.net, and you can find this podcast on all the places that you get your recordings, including also on YouTube at Karen Harrison Reiki and on my website. And my guest today is Amanda MCordic. She is a mother, wife, lawyer, entrepreneur, terminal cancer survivor, and a Holy Fire Karuna Reiki master. Her, let's see, I don't know that you have your website. Yes, it's dragonflyreiki.me. Okay, so that's pretty easy, dragonflyreiki.me. And I'm not going to tell any more about her story because it's so fascinating that, we want to hear more about it from her. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks. And also welcome to Shannon, who just joined us. Glad you're here. All right, so Amanda, you were first diagnosed with cancer back in 2019. What was your life like before then?
So it's really funny. So I was 36 in 2019. I was living a life that, if you kind of looked outwardly, it looked like I was checking all the boxes that society wanted me to. So I had a very successful practice. Legal practice. I was married to a man, my first husband, Matt, and we had been married since 2007, and we had built kind of a company for him and a company for me. So financially, we were, very abundant. We have a son and a daughter together that were healthy and happy. Big fancy house, nice cars, vacations, jewelry, all of it. So from the outside looking in, it looked like we had everything. But the reality was my husband had severe mental health issues that we discovered later was most likely untreated schizophrenia. I was in a constant state of hypervigilance, both at home with my husband, who was very volatile between his mental health and his addiction issues. But also I had kind of worked my way into the niche of high conflict divorces. So I dealt with, children that had been molested, children that were being alienated from their parents. Human misery is what I spent all of my day in. And I was such a martyr, if I'm honest. I really thought that my shoulders were stronger than everybody else's, that I was better at figuring out everybody else's problems. And so I ran around like a chicken with my head cut off, buffering everybody from the natural consequences of their actions and decisions. And I was exhausted.
I didn't know you could do that.
Turns out you can't.
I didn't think so. I'm a family therapist myself, and no, that
no. Well, and what I discovered is that I was really good at making people's ruts comfortable enough that they didn't actually get out of them. And so and meanwhile, I almost killed myself doing it. So in the fall, so I discovered my first tumor in early December of 2019. Just before that, my life was just in a total period of upheaval. I had tried to leave my husband. It hadn't gone well. We had actually reconciled literally days before I found my tumor. So I was in Toys R Us with my daughter, and my bra strap fell down. And I just slid my hand in to slide it up, and all of a sudden I felt this large, hard tumor. And it was about the size of an egg. And I don't know how I didn't see it before then, but I really didn't. Luckily, I was doing my medical professional, my doctor, I was doing her divorce. And so I was able to get in very quickly with a doctor. And from there, things kind of moved quickly. But the amazing thing about all that is many months before, I had gone to a psychic as a gift to my office manager. We had both gone to see the psychic. Christy Flynn is her name, and she was very good. She told me all about my personality. She also told me my husband was going to die, and that I could delay it, but I couldn't prevent it. And she ended up to be quite correct. But she told me my personality. She just looked at my soul, and it was so clear that she was the real deal. And she said, I know that you're terrible at self-care. I know you cancel massages and therapy and everything else. But if you ignore everything else I've told you today, you need to go find this Reiki master named Pam Allen LeBlanc. And she doesn't live far from you. You need to book her first available session. I don't care what you have to cancel, you take her first available session. I had and she was so intense about it that I listened. And that was about 2 months out. Pam is, very popular where we're at. So it was about a 2-month wait. So I booked the session and kind of forgot about it. I literally found my tumor on a Monday night, and Tuesday morning I had my first Reiki session with Pam.
Wow.
Yeah, and so for me, my cancer journey and my Reiki journey really started the same day. And if I'm honest, they're both crutches. I see both of them as what I needed to break kind of the patterns that I was in. Cancer was certainly a crutch for me. So that was 2019, December. They had told me that there was nothing that couldn't be fixed. I really thought it was going to be a short pause in my life. I was misdiagnosed. And so it was much more aggressive than they thought it was. And so in early February, they operated. And by then there was 7 tumors. And it was all into my chest wall. And then of course they biopsied it from there, and it turned out that it was very aggressive, and it had spread to my bones. So in April of 2020, April 2nd, I was diagnosed terminal, and it was just a few weeks before my 37th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's and the first Reiki session I had with Pam, I had a very limited understanding of what it was. But I knew that was the most peace that I had felt in my whole life. I had never known a calmness inside of me before, and I had never felt so comfortable in my own skin. And so I had told Pam about the tumor, and she said, well, we can work on that. And so I started having sessions with her every week, and it quickly became my favorite hour of the week.
Wow. Well, that is an amazing start. Well, that reminds me that we're going to do a grounding meditation, which I forgot all about. I've had quite the day with my internet. It came back up minutes before the Reiki Call podcast. So very grateful for that. Anyway, well, let's all just take a moment to center and ground. So if you have Reiki, put your hands together and activate your Reiki energy. And if you don't have Reiki, just put your hands together and activate healing energy from your spiritual source. And focus on the space between your palms, letting all thoughts be brushed aside. And this is called Gassho meditation. And I'm going to move into the Reiki ideals, and then we'll continue on with our Gassho. So just for today, we let go of anger. We let go of worry. We do our work honestly. We're grateful. And we're kind to others, beginning with ourselves. And now return to focusing on the space between your palms. Which means the silence. And now place your hands on your heart and give yourself a little bit of Reiki. Breathe in the love that Reiki is sharing with you. And now go ahead and return. All right, so yes, Reiki with Pam. Well, let's just share about who Pam is. So she is one of my wonderful colleagues with the International Center for Reiki Training, and I'm the co-director of the Licensed Teacher Training Program, and she is the assistant director, and so I get to work closely with Pam, and she is multi-talented. So she's up in New Brunswick, Canada, which in case you don't know where that is, because I didn't, that is Eastern Canada on the coast area. And it's in a whole new time zone that I'd also never heard of called Atlantic time, which is, let's see, it's 1 hour from Eastern time. So an hour later.
We're just above Maine. We're like the Canadian Maine.
Canadian Maine. Okay, well, that's a good way to refer to it. So, so can you continue telling us a little bit more about how Reiki came into your life?
Yeah, so after the psychic had directed me there, and I had kind of felt that initial feeling. And it was interesting. So me and Pam, our personalities really connected. We're very similar. I often think that me and Pam kind of walk a lot of the same path. She's ahead of me. So she's been a wonderful mentor to me. And really, it took about 6 months where I was having sessions every week before I really started to understand and appreciate what Reiki was. I was just so overwhelmed by the peace I found in the beginning that I really couldn't get enough of it. Once I was diagnosed terminal in April of 2020, I always say, like, I have no doubt that I put cancer in my path when I was planning my life's journey. And I always kind of thought that it was almost like if I was going off track, I put cancer in to kind of make me wake up and kind of readjust what I was doing. And I always joke that cancer in and of itself wasn't enough. I didn't wake up after cancer. I started to, but it really took a terminal cancer diagnosis for me to stop and look around and think, like, what am I doing with my life? It didn't occur. Self-care was almost non-existent. I had poor substitute for self-care, which was mostly late night Amazon binge shopping, if I'm honest.
I'm sure a few of us have done that.
Oh, I had a whole room in my house. At my office, we had the Amazon box room, right? So, because it really got to the point where I didn't have it all delivered to the house because I didn't want my husband and housekeeper knowing. And so half would go to my office because I didn't want all my staff knowing how much. Like, it was just ridiculous. And that was a substitute for self-care. My husband, I really thought it was my mission in life was to hold him together so that his business could continue, so that the people that work for him wouldn't know, for the people his clients wouldn't know. I just spun myself completely exhausted, just out trying to run around keeping these pretenses up. And when somebody tells you that you're going to die and you're probably going to die quickly, all of a sudden everything kind of that doesn't matter drops. It's an incredible gift if you can get past the shock and the sadness of being told that your life is going to be over quickly. It is an amazing gift. And so my very kind oncologist sat me down and told me that it had spread into my tailbone and my ribs, that it was considered terminal, and that it was grade 3, which is the most aggressive form of cancer on they graded on a 1, 2, 3 scale. So I had a grade 3, stage 4. And I was told it was just going to explode through me. So they said that it may be in my brain already. They didn't know, but certainly it would explode through all my soft tissue very quickly. I asked if there was any point if I should change my diet. She was so loving, but very pessimistic. So she said, I said, should I quit sugar? I read sugar is bad. Should I, go to a vegan diet? And she said, Amanda, there's nothing you can do. This is out of your hands. This isn't something you can problem solve. You need to accept that you're going to die of cancer, and probably fairly quickly. So she had told me that 3 to 5 years was the average for breast cancer, stage 4 breast cancer. And I remember her taking my hand and very lightly saying, but some people go much faster. I didn't realize in that moment that she meant me. Because 3 to 5 years sounded short enough. At the time, my little girl was 8, almost 9. And it was, and my son was 18, but he was actually my stepson, and his mother had actually been murdered. So all I could think of was my son, who I had been raising since he was 9. He was going to lose another mother. And, like all these thoughts are just swimming in your head. And so I said, well, what if, should I exercise? And she said, only exercise if you love it. You can't really tell, but I got some girth to me. I am not a runner. I am a sitter. So I didn't start exercising. But, like everything I asked about, she, eventually she just, in the kindest possible way, she shut me down and said, you need to get your head around the fact that you're going to die from cancer. You need to go close your business. You need to write your will, and you need to figure out what's going to happen with your kids.
I mean,
and in the last
terrifying. Part, that's just like,
it really was. And in hindsight, I should have known, because she moved my appointment from the middle of the day to the end of the day. And I always think, like, nobody wants to tell a 36-year-old woman that they're going to die and then go see another client, another patient. So, so I came home, and this was again during COVID, right when everything was locking down. So in New Brunswick, we had very strict bubbles. So we weren't allowed outside of our house. And in fact, my husband couldn't even go to the doctor's appointment with me. So I had to tell my mother over the phone. I had to tell everybody over the phone. And so, I came home, and it was just, it was a very intense night. I felt a driving need to tell my daughter, who again, she was 8 at the time, almost 9. And I remember she's very wise for her age, but she said, I have 2 parents, and only one can look after me. And the one that's going to look after me is going to die. And I was like, yeah, buddy, that's where we're at. And so we talked about, if mommy can't raise you, who do you want to raise you? And she actually said her principal she was going to this little Montessori school, and she said, I'd want Miss Wanda to raise me. And I said, oh, that's a big ask, And actually, within 48 hours, Miss Wanda actually reached out through a friend and said, I don't want to overstep. But if something happens to you, everybody knew my husband wasn't in a headspace to raise her. She said, if anything happens to you, can I take her? And what an amazing gift, to know that that's where she could go. But so I started planning my death.
Wow.
But there was and I am a planner. I'm a type A personality, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm about to cry here. This is like, whoa, just kind of gut-wrenching. Wow.
Well, in my own husband, Maddie, he had struggled for years with suicidal ideation, with alcohol and cocaine addiction, with we called it the darkness. We didn't know what it was, and we had tried to get him help, but he was exceedingly intelligent, exceedingly charming, and I don't think anyone could ever believe how sick he was, because he presented so well. But he had literally, in the years before that, destroyed our house from top to bottom 3 times. He had gone missing for 2 weeks. He thought he was in a whole nother part of the country. Like it had been a really dramatic struggle. Me and the kids, I remember I had this gut-wrenching moment when I realized that my 9-year-old knew how to pack and get out of the house quick. She knew what to take. And there's this intense moment of pride that this child can put her head down, get everything she needs, get what the dogs need. We had 2 little dogs, or have 2 little dogs. She could pack everything she needed and get out of the house in 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes. And she would bring snacks and drinks and everything else. It was just, so there's this intense pride, but then there's also this sadness that she knows how to do this so quickly, and that we had normalized so much just very erratic behavior. So she was, my kids were already used to a lot. But yeah, my son, sitting him down to say, like, I have cancer and I'm going to die.
Mhm.
And, he had already gone through so much. His mother had her own addiction issues before she died. She went missing for a period of time and then was discovered murdered. We had to do victim impact statements. And I mean, that all happened before he was 13. And he wrote this beautiful impact statement saying that he forgave the man that killed her because he knew that he was sick. And it's just incredible, powerful. So anyway, so I sat down to tell him, and I remember he gave me a hug and said, because I had told him 3 to 5 is what we're looking at. And he's like, well, we don't know what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years. You could be fine. And I'm going to live with hope, he said. And I think that kind of planted a seed with me. And so I gave myself 48 hours to feel real sorry for myself. And so I sat in my bathtub and I cried and I cursed and I said it wasn't fair. And my husband, when I told Matt, he completely fell apart, and he had this intense guilt because I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't do drugs. I was as straight laced as they came. And he was this wild child. He had been a wild child his whole life. And he said, how are you the one that has cancer? How are you dying of cancer? I should be dying of cancer, not you. And he told me either that night or the next morning, he said, I have no interest in being on this planet if you're not here. I can barely hold my stuff together with you here. And I certainly can't be, I certainly don't have anything for the kids. And I think he knew that he was more of a detriment to the kids in a lot of ways, as far as the instability and the darkness that went with him, that came and went. So yeah, it was a really difficult time. I gave myself the 48 hours to just sulk and feel bad about myself, or bad for myself. I didn't need the full 48 hours. About hour 36, I thought, like, okay, that's enough of this. Like, I can't cry anymore. I can't curse anymore. What are you going to do? And so I got it in my head that I was going to prove them wrong, and I was going to live 10 years. I thought that would put my daughter through high school. I had such a planner, right? I'm like, okay, so that will get her through high school. She'll take a gap year. I'll die in her gap year. She'll have some time to get over it, and then she'll go off to university, right? Like I had a plan. And so I started researching, and it was important that it was during COVID, because I not only did I bury myself in Amazon shopping, I buried myself in work. And literally my whole adult life, I had hidden everybody else's problems so that I didn't have to look inwardly for my own stuff. So I stood next to my husband that was just, this massive problems. No one ever said, oh, you should be working on yourself, Amanda. All the attention was on what a hot mess he was and what a saint I was for holding him together, right? And then I'd go to work and I would hide in everybody else's problems and, twist myself inside out trying to solve their problems while completely ignoring what was going on inside of me. And so it was an amazing period of time, because I was diagnosed terminal right when the New Brunswick courts closed for COVID. There was no court to be had. There was no work for me to hide in. It's the only 6-week period in the province's history where everything closed. And that's exactly what I needed. There was nobody to hide in. There was no problems to hide in. all I could do was face my impending mortality and the anger and just the deep anger I had at myself for what I had done with my life. I thought, like, you got to be kidding me. This, like, I have worked so hard. I have all this stuff, and none of it has necessarily made me happy. And now I'm going to die. Um,
Mm.
and so I made the decision that, yeah, I was going to try 10 years. I asked my main oncologist, and she said, that's not possible, Amanda. That's just not possible. I had had a second opinion with another oncologist, and I told him my plan. And by then, by the time it was about 6 weeks out from when I saw him, so by then I had already started making my plan. And so I said to him, I need 10 years. And he said, oh, Amanda, that's just with what you have, that, you know, that's not likely. I said, but is it possible? Because all I need is faint hope.
Mhm.
Like, I just need something to work towards. And so he kind of let this long sigh out of him, and he had written down all the things I was doing. And he said, it's highly, highly improbable, Amanda. Maybe possible. And I said, that maybe possible is all I need. And so I started researching everything I could as far as what could help put my body in the best position to heal versus what would feed cancer. So I dramatically changed my diet. I read everything I could get my hands on. And one of the reoccurring themes was this mind-body connection, letting go of trapped emotions, letting go of resentments, letting go of all that stuff. And of course, Reiki fits so perfectly into that. You know,
Yes.
yeah. And so if you look at, you know, there's a book called Radical Remission, which is about terminal cancer patients who have radically gone into, you know, miraculously gone into remission when they weren't supposed to. And they look at the different factors. Most of them, the top 7 out of 10, are actually around that mind-body experience. What you do with trapped emotions, what you do with resentments, how you perceive yourself, the conversation you have in your head. And so once I started realizing all of that, I really doubled down on the Reiki. And so Pam would record our sessions each week. I would listen to those over and over again. Sometimes I'd sleep with them all night long. Um, and I made the decision that I was going to build a life that I loved, whether or not that was for 3 months or 10 years. But I was done living for everybody else. And I called it my cancer card. And so when I didn't want to do something, I'd say, no, I can't do that. I have terminal cancer. You know, it was like this get out of jail free card. And it allowed me to cut all of these toxic kind of relationships I was in, these, you know, in some ways, I had almost a lot of energy vampires, I would call them, kind of. And I don't find fault in them. They needed they were just looking for a source, and I was the source. And I allowed that to happen. I had no boundaries, very few boundaries. And so I started building the life that I wanted. And I started doing Reiki in the woods, and I started reading about it. You know, I did my first class with Pam in May of 2020. 6 months later, I think they let me go start 3 days shy of 6 months. I did my master's. And then really it just kind of started evolving from there. In the summer of 2020, I underwent some very intensive radiation. It completely wiped me out. And I'm someone who I go nonstop. And so to have no energy, and it's a weird, you don't understand it till you've lived through it. Like, I couldn't watch TV. I was too tired. I couldn't even really keep my eyes open. I just kind of laid there existing. And I was so angry at the time. I thought, what a waste, like, what a waste of time. But what I did was I listened to those meditations on repeat. So I was listening to Reiki. I was in the energy 12 to 14 hours a day during that time.
Wow.
And now in hindsight, I see the soul growth that came from that. I was letting go of, I remember Pam in one of our early sessions said, you realize that your worth isn't tied to how much you produce. And I said, no, that's wrong. It's totally tied to how much I produce. And I really believe that if I wasn't running around solving everybody's problems, being everybody's hero, then I had no value. And, like Reiki just helped me burn through that assumption. And I started seeing the value I had just as me. And healing becomes, I don't want to say addictive because that's got negative connotations, but healing, once you start, you don't want to stop.
Mhm.
And I have seen, one of my favorite things to say is healing is contagious, because it wasn't just my healing. I was watching my healing go out through my friend network too. And in fact, my dear friend Charlene that works with me now, she actually said that she actually went out and started Reiki, exploring Reiki herself, because she said she couldn't figure out what was going on. She said, I thought you had lost your damn mind. You know, you come and you tell us you're going to die. And then you just kept getting happier and happier and happier and happier. And she couldn't figure out what was going on. My main oncologist in May, so about 6 weeks after my initial diagnosis, we had a meeting. She was very concerned that I wasn't being realistic um, about my situation. And she said, I think you're living on false hope. I said, I have made the decision to live with hope. And if you think it's false, that's fine. I said, but every day I wake up with hope. And if I end up dying the exact time that you think I was going to, who cares? You know, if that's if that's, you know, versus waking up every day waiting to die and full of despair. Yeah, so that brings us to May. You know, I remember my doctor saying, you know, you must be just sleeping all the time. And, you know, so they expected me to kind of be going down, and I just kept getting stronger and healthier. I changed my diet. I started using Rick Simpson oil, which is legal in Canada. It's a cannabis oil. I started doing all these things and I thought, like, even if each thing only increases my chance by 10%, if you do enough of those things, right, you know, it's gonna, um,
Yeah.
so in the summer I did the radiation. It wiped me out. So I did hours and hours of Reiki in my backyard. Um,
Yeah. So you were giving yourself Reiki as well as continuing on the sessions with Pam and listening.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I was doing anywhere I could find Reiki. So podcasts, anywhere I could find Reiki, that's all I was doing. Um,
Oh,
in in August, they in August I met with my oncologist, and she actually said, you know, I didn't expect you to be here today. And I said, oh, you know, I wouldn't miss an oncology appointment. And she said, no, we thought you would be dead by now. And she said the cancer you had was so aggressive, we didn't think that anything would have time to be effective enough. Which made more sense of why she was telling me, like, not to jog and eat whatever I wanted. So in November of 2020, I had my first full scans since my terminal diagnosis. I didn't get the results of them to January, just because of, you know, my main oncologist that kind of said, like, oh yeah, you know, they were good and we're happy with them. But the rad oncologist, who was more in charge of me at that point, I met with him in the beginning of January. And I remember he walked in and he had the largest smile on. And he just said, has anyone told you about your scans? And I said, yeah, I heard that they're good. And he goes, no, good is not the word. They're amazing. All the cancer was gone.
Wow.
And yeah, so it had healed in all the spots. My largest spot was in my tailbone. So he put the two scans up, and you could see the bright white bone. And he said, that is new healed bone. You know, your cancer looks like spirally because it kind of has tentacles that spreads out. That was all gone. It was just this bright, shiny white bone. So I have remained cancer free since November of 2020. I am off all medication associated with cancer.
Wow.
I live a full, active life. But one of the things that was happening while I was during my year of kind of self love and healing was that I was watching my partner become less and less enthusiastic about living. And because of my mortality, we were having more conversations about mortality, about, you know, what we were prepared to live with and what we weren't. Because I had said to him, I'm not doing harsh chemo. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I'm not dragging it out over 3 or 4 years. And I don't want my kids to remember me that way. I don't want their teen years to be that way. And I knew it was more than my husband's mental health could handle. And we had this very dramatic conversation where he said, I hate the thoughts of you not being here, but I would never want you to be here in intolerable pain. And I, in that moment, realized that that's what I had been asking him to do for years. And I said nothing. I buried that away to kind of think about it more. In that January, after we found out that the cancer was gone, he said he was very happy about that, but that hadn't changed things for him, that he was still worried that it would come back, and he struggled under the stress of that. And really, I was fighting to heal and to build the life that I wanted, and he was distancing himself from anything that could help. And I had to accept that there was exactly one person that could save him in the world, and it wasn't me. It was him, and he had to want it. And so it was a very
lesson. That was a valuable lesson, that you couldn't save him, you couldn't fix him, you couldn't rescue him.
And I had tried, and I'm a really good problem solver. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And we had tried everything, and he was exceedingly smart. I used to think we had everything we needed on paper to succeed. We had the finances to send him to, any rehab that he wanted to go. And in fact, we tried that. We had the money for everything, and we still couldn't get there. But my willpower alone wasn't enough. And so he started talking very openly about suicide. And I started listening in a way that I hadn't before. And I never really thought that he would commit suicide, because I used to say, like, you have such a drive and you have such a love. He had this amazing zest for life. He was mischievous and playful and just larger than life. He threw the best parties. He was a great friend to the people around him. He was a good employer. But in the end of March, there was a blow up, and it started over nothing. We have this little mini wiener, so he's about 9 pounds, and he had run out on the street, and he's 9 pounds. He had caused no harm, but it started this spiral down, and my son and him had gotten into a physical fight, and me and the kids had to leave, and that had never happened before. I always thought, I always drew these lines in my head: if he does this, then I'll leave. And he had started getting physical a few months before that. And I had always thought that if he hit me, I would leave. I always thought that was, and again, you have to keep in mind, I'm a divorce lawyer. I am counseling women to leave situations like this day in, day out. I'm helping them find place, actively involved in going home to this. But the fight with my son was different. It's one thing to put your hands on me, it's another for our kid. And so me and the kids had left, and it kind of started this downward spiral. He had agreed, me and the kids were in the hotel for about 7 days with 2 dogs, and I had said to Matt, okay, you need to leave, we need to move back into the house. And he said, okay, tomorrow morning, if I'm still alive, I'll go to rehab, because I found this beautiful rehab on the coast. And the night, his last night on this earth, me and him sat quietly, and we talked, and I tried to encourage him to go to rehab. And for me, again, I'm a very logical thinker. I thought, why wouldn't you try? Right? Why wouldn't you try it? And I still was in denial about whether or not he would actually do it, but I had enough insight to know that I didn't want to risk not saying anything, not saying everything that was in my heart. And so we talked for 3 hours, and it was beautiful and painful, awful and a gift all at the same time.
Wow.
And then I said goodbye to him. And I said, I don't believe you want to die, but I also know that I can't make you live. And so I'm going to see you in the morning. And he agreed. He said, if I'm still alive in the morning, I will try it your way. I'll go do rehab. And I said, okay. And I drove home to, well, I drove to the hotel where me and where the kids were staying. And I remember screaming in the car, we cannot take anymore. I don't know what kind of ambitious life plan that I have come up with, but it is too much and we need release, whatever that looks like. I put it into the hands of the universe. And that was like the first time that I really let go of control, because I was really good at letting go of control of everything associated with me. But I always say, like, do what you want with me. But then I'd almost whisper, but don't take Matt from me. But don't take Matt. And finally, in that moment, I released all of it. We had planned to meet up the next morning after I dropped the kids off. I was gonna drop the kids off and come to the house and help him, drive him to rehab and all that. Both my kids woke up sick with stomach pains, and they just said they just felt awful. I said, like, can we stay at the hotel? So my son stayed with my daughter. So that meant I got to the house about an hour and a half sooner. I remember pulling into my garage, and sitting in my car for a few minutes and just doing Reiki, just to ground and center myself. I then walked into the house and I stuck my head around the corner to see if he was sitting in his chair, because he had told me that he wanted to die in his chair. And he wasn't there. And I thought, okay, we missed another near miss, like life goes on. And we have a 2-story house. So I remember hustling my buns up the stairs, and I was thinking, don't go in there and just start at him about rehab. Just go in and love him as he is in this moment. Just go in and show him human kindness. And I opened our bedroom door, and he was sitting up in bed breathing. And I just came into my head, I thought, what is the red stuff all over his face? And then I realized that he had shot himself in the head, but was still alive. And so I don't have any memories of leaving the room. I don't remember going down the stairs. My next memory is we have these beautiful French doors that lead to our backyard. And I remember I was leaning up against them, trying to get my hands to work so I could call somebody. And I just couldn't. I remember thinking, like, the signals I couldn't make my hands work. Luckily, the last person I talked to was one of my best friends who was a doctor. And so I hit her name, and she, of course, she was in the middle of her morning routine with her kids driving to school. And I had the wherewithal to say, am I on speaker? And she said, yep. I said, you need to take me off speaker right now. And so I called her. So she took me off, and I told her that I had found Matt and he was alive with a gunshot wound to the head. And it was really, and so then, that kind of kicked me back into life. So I talked to her for a minute, then I called 911. And so then everything exploded. Of course, the police showed up, the ambulance showed up. My friend Kelsey arrived at the same time. And the police were very suspicious because Matt had made it very clear to me that he wanted to die at home. And just to back up, in 2019, just before my cancer diagnosis, he had gone through a very bad depression and had made a lot of suicidal statements. And so I had him forcibly confined. And it was a horrific experience. He was put in a straitjacket and left in a room with lights on for over 24 hours. And I remember thinking, if he wasn't insane before, he would be now. And in fact, it brought out a real darkness in him. He had said that if they had let him out, he would have killed me. And I often thought, I used to say all the time, you're going to end up killing me. So I had promised him that I would never force him back to the hospital. And so when the police arrived and the ambulance arrived, somebody said, don't worry, we'll do what we can to save him. And I said, he doesn't want to be saved. He just wants to die at home. Please let him die at home. Of course, I understand they couldn't do that, but in the moment, I just wanted him to be released. And so, of course, the police were very suspicious. And so, they put me in the back of the police car. It was horrific. And I kept saying to them, I will tell you everything, but I'm not doing it from the back of the police car. Anyway, eventually they let me go to the hospital. The hospital called and said, where are you? So at that point they drove me to the hospital, and my friend stayed with me. My lovely doctor friend Kelsey stayed with me. And we live in a very small, like we only have one hospital in our city. And she said she was there so people knew that what I was saying, like kind of as credibility, right? Like what she's saying is true. So because he had shot himself and hadn't died, they did brain scans to see what damage was done to his brain. And that it was actually he used to say all the time, I'm not scared of dying, I'm scared it's going to go wrong and I'm going to shoot myself and not die. And I kind of said, like, Matt, I think that's really rare. Like, I don't, I would, like, that's so rare. I thought it, anyway. Um, but it was a gift, which I know is shocking to say. And I know it may offend some people, but it was a gift because they did scans of his brain. And then the neurologist came in, and I'll remember it to the day I die. He came into the room and he said, did anyone ever tell you he had schizophrenia? And I said, what? Is that what it was? And he said, yeah, his whole frontal lobe is dark. And I said, well, is that from the shot? And he said, no, the shot was further back. But it looks like he had, schizophrenia that hadn't ever been treated. And I said, no, nobody had even suggested that could be what it was. And my husband was adopted. And afterwards, we kind of found out that his uncle had actually committed suicide after receiving a schizophrenia diagnosis at 43, which is the same age as Matt was. So then we talked about organ donation. We had never talked about it before. He had drank so much, smoked 2 packs a day, had done enough drugs. I thought nobody would ever want them. So 3 times they asked me, and finally the 3rd time, like I said, like, can you imagine waiting 7 years for lungs? And then you get those lungs? Like, it just seemed like such a terrible deal for us to get them. But they convinced me, and I agreed. When you do organ donation, there is a lot of very, very invasive questions that they ask you. It took about 3 hours. I answered them all, and it really felt, these were all secrets that I had kept of Matt. How much drug he used, his alcohol, all that. So it was the first of me really opening up to kind of lay all that bare. On the day that they went to do the organ transplants, I was walking into the funeral home to plan his funeral, and I get a call from the hospital, and they say, we just want to let you know that we cannot use anything from him. And I said, oh, because of the drug use. And they said, no, he is full of metastatic renal cancer. So, and it's kind of funny is the wrong word, but the whole time when he kept saying, I should be the one to have cancer, I kept saying, like, don't be so sure you don't. In fact, he was supposed to go for testing blood work, and he didn't go. And I had bugged him, and finally he said, Amanda, the day you were diagnosed terminal, I quit taking my medication for diabetes. I quit taking my medication for my high blood pressure. What makes you think if I had cancer, I would do anything to treat it? And I had accepted that I needed to leave it alone. So his life was coming to an end, and I've often wondered if we have medically assisted dying in Canada, so he could have gone very peacefully at home, surrounded by family. And I often wondered if that wouldn't have been a better end for us. But I think it would have been traumatic for my kids to think both of their parents were dying from cancer at the same time.
Boy, this is just, I don't know how you managed to still be here.
Reiki is how I managed. So one of the things I did after Matt died, I went and I sat in our room before anything was cleaned up, because I decided that I wasn't going to hide from any of it, that I had spent my whole life burying things that hurt and staying away from things that hurt and building walls to make sure that things couldn't hurt me. And I knew that I couldn't do that anymore. And so I went into the room, blood everywhere. And I just sat and I took it all in. And I thought of all the wonderful memories we had in that room, all of the laughter. Like with Matt, the light was light and the dark was dark, and there was nothing in between. So in the same week, I could often think that we were the happiest two married people in the whole world. And in the same week, I could think he was going to kill me. And that was just a pattern that repeated over and over and over again and became more intense. We were together like 17 years. So that pattern had gotten more intense. But there was incredible gifts from that. So um, I had told him when I was holding his hand at the hospital that it was okay to let go and that my grampy would be there to meet him. Because my grampy, I was raised by a single mom. My grandfather was just a key, pivotal person in my life. And Matt knew that. And Matt always had a lot of respect for my grandfather. And so I said, my grampy's going to be there to meet you, and you don't have to be scared. Like, you can let go. And when I got to our room, when I sat to process it, my grandfather's obituary was on the nightstand beside him where he died. I don't know where he found that. There was also a big pile of cocaine beside him, which, I don't want to be tacky, but I never thought my husband would die until he did all the coke. And he had told me that he had finally kicked the habit. And for me, that was, like, there was proof. And in fact, when I went into my closet, he had taken cocaine that he had and had blown it all over my black clothes. All of my black clothes were ruined because I think that was like he didn't want me to wear black. So I had to wear white to the funeral planning, all that, because anything that had black, he had blown cocaine on. Yeah, yeah. I sat in that room for a long time and I thought, I'm going to take all of this in and I'm going to be thankful for anything that I can be. And I'm going to learn from anything I'm not thankful for until I learned enough that I am thankful for it. So that started, it was very interesting. I felt very, very light and connected to him in the days after he died. One of the things I had said to him the night before our last conversation, I had said, if you do this, you need to send me signs that you're okay. And it needs to be, his name is Matt Wilson. It needs to be Matt Wilson style. It needs to be so over the top and ridiculous that we giggle. And that happened. So we find dimes everywhere. We have dime jars that are just around the house and full. It started within about 12 hours of his death. And you have to keep in mind, we tap everything. I don't have cash. We tap everything. But we started finding dimes under towels, in the wall, in the flower garden, in a shoe. It's amazing the places we found dimes. So we started getting this signs from him almost immediately that he was okay. And I could always feel energetically, even before I knew about Reiki, I could always tell energetically how he was doing. So he could be in Las Vegas on a bender and I could feel it. He could be fishing in the mountains and I would know when he was okay and I would know when he was agitated. And I felt he was calm. I felt his presence. We went through the funeral. It was beautiful. We had to limit the number because of COVID again, but it was streamed online over 1,600 times. It's still online. People watch the funeral. I spoke. Actually, I asked Pam to lead it. It was a Reiki funeral.
Wow.
Yeah. But so I was fine while that was happening. But then once all that's over and you're just left with your silence, it was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It was way more exhausting than cancer. And then the other fear, of course, was when I had gotten this wonderful news about my cancer, my doctor had said, you're doing good now, but at some point something will happen. Whether it's you get a really bad flu or you have some big emotional thing happen in your life and your immune system is going to be compromised. That's when the cancer is going to come back. And so I had this, I can't think of anything that would be more stressful than that. And so I really doubled down into my healing. I went back to what worked for cancer to work on getting through Matt. And it was harder. It was way harder than cancer, hands down. I got into a bad habit of staying up all night and looking at pictures of our happiest days. that led me into a bit of a, you know, I had to remind myself that those were not representative necessarily of our life on a whole. And I really had to confront a lot of what I carried with me inside. And, you know, I went through a lot of different waves, and it wasn't all pretty. It wasn't all, you know, butterflies and skipping through the tulips. There was anger. I was so angry at him because I had suppressed so many nights of abuse and hurt and cheat. Like I used to say, there wasn't a line that I put that he didn't immediately run across. So yeah, I really focused on just allowing myself to feel my emotions, not to judge them, right? Just to let them be. And I decided that what I was going to do was,
Important. So,
yeah,
so important. Emotions are just energy, and we can allow them to run through us. We don't need to stuff them. We don't need to suppress them. We just allow them to run through us and don't hold on and let them flow.
what, and how I decided to do it is I decided to treat myself as I would treat my daughter. So I would ask questions. Why do you feel that way? What's the fear behind that? Where does that come from? Is there any, you know, emotional, and so yeah, but in the middle of all that healing, it became apparent to me that, you know, I was meditating a massive amount, and I know we're running out of time, but the universe kept telling me that I had a special project, and that special project was Dragonfly Reiki Marketplace. And so, way outside my wheelhouse, I do have a strong business background, but not techie at all. But I knew what Reiki had done to my life, and I know how miraculous it was that it came in right when I did. And I had met all these wonderful Reiki ladies or Reiki practitioners who had such strong light and such healing abilities. But they were scared to open practices. There was logistical hurdles. They had full-time jobs and kids and families, and so I decided to do all that I could to remove those barriers and create an online platform where Reiki practitioners could create their landing page or their stall. And I think back to like what a market looks like, right? So every practitioner has their own page where they get to put on who they are, meditations, their credentials, the areas that they specialize in. They can link YouTube to it if they have meditations there. And then people who are seeking practitioners can come on. Everything's free to join. So practitioners join for free. Clients join for free. And they have just this list of different Reiki practitioners from around the world, from different backgrounds, from different experiences. So we now have practitioners in Canada, US, UK, Australia, Japan, and Romania. And we can add anywhere. And really the purpose of it's to create an online community where anyone who is seeking Reiki can find it, and remove the logistical barriers for people who want to start a practice. So when people book through, we take care of the payments. We keep 20%, we send 80% right on to the practitioners. Practitioners there's no minimum or maximum as far as how many hours. If you want to do 2 sessions a month, if that's what your life fits, great. The world needs those 2 hours of Reiki a month. If you want to do it full time, great. There's no maximums, no minimums. You can change your hours weekly. I think a lot of the moms who have kids that are in lots of activities, you can adjust your hours weekly to what you're available. I think often of the nurses and stuff who work shift work, this allows them to find somebody because of the various time zones. You know, if the only time you can do a Reiki session is from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. because that's when your kids are in bed and the house is quiet, that's okay. We have different time zones that accommodate that. And really, it's about helping get Reiki into small communities where maybe they don't have a local Reiki practitioner, or countries where Reiki is new. So really, the purpose of Dragonfly is to share the light, the healing, and the hope of Reiki to anywhere someone seeks it, and to empower Reiki practitioners to share their light as easily and instantly as possible.
Well, that's amazing. So people would just download the app and then be able to access different Reiki practitioners.
Yeah, so the app is a more slimmed down version. So to explore, I would recommend going on the desk or the Dragonfly Reiki.me. That has kind of more of our story. There's a clip, there's different videos from some of our Reiki practitioners. But as far as once you kind of explored it, if you're just there to book a session, you pull it up on your app. You can look and see who's available the same day. Same day appointments are always available currently. We also have a community board, which allows any of our practitioners to post any Reiki shares they have, classes. You think about, again, the whole model is an online market. And so if you think back to the markets, there was always those big bulletin boards where people put all their little stuff up. That's what I wanted. And yeah, there it is, dragonflyreiki.me. That's what I wanted to recreate. So any practitioner can post there. It's free to post your activities there. We also have something for the Reiki practitioners called the Healing Lounge, the Healer's Lounge. And what that is a place to support Reiki practitioners when they have questions, when there are doubts, when they're feeling, just again, that online community is what we're trying to create. It's open to all lineages. So I'm under the ICRT, and I'm exceedingly thankful and grateful for the structure and the education I've received there. But we did really feel guided to leave it open to all lineages of Reiki, which is again consistent with the ICRT. And then also other modalities. So it's really interesting to see how people are combining Reiki with other modalities to increase. Like we have people that do forest bathing, virtual, in person. We have just a plethora. Like I really feel like, for instance, I love working with terminal patients. So, you can go in and pick by different categories. If you want somebody, who's maybe from, who's dealt with suicide or cancer or whatever, transgender, whatever, there's all those different subheadings. And we add if we have a practitioner who feels that there's a special area that they shine in or they're strong in, we add that in for them as well. So we're highly adaptive. It has been just an absolute exercise in patience, because it is so far outside our wheelhouse. I'm a classic type A personality, so I thought this app was going to be done for September 2022. It was done 3 weeks ago. So,
Wow.
Yeah. So, but the universe kept telling me that it would be ready when I was ready. And you know what? I wasn't ready 4 weeks ago. I was ready 3 weeks ago. So,
Wow.
so yeah. So now begins the next chapter, and I actually have been asking people, our Reiki friends. I would ask that you put Dragonfly if you have a Reiki grid, or just to send it to us, because this is outside of our comfort zone. It isn't like any business I've ever had. It really is my thank you to the universe for my second chance at my beautiful life. And I have an exceedingly beautiful life. I actually met the love of my life after swearing up and down I would never marry or live with a man again. I met the absolute love of my life. He is wonderful to my kid. My kids adore him. We got married on February 14th, 2023. I've got a great life. I got the best life ever.
Wow.
And I don't look like I have
Thank
cancer,
God.
do I?
I mean, thank God. I mean, I'm thinking, okay, you've had one of the most difficult lives I've ever heard of, and I've been a therapist for 30 years, and you've come through some amazing things. So I just have to acknowledge and applaud your resilience and your dedication to healing physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I mean, it's like you packed 5 lifetimes into one lifetime of
So
living. So now you should have the rest of your life be kind of your vacation lifetime.
well, yeah. So I often, on my hardest days, I would chuckle to myself and say, "Oh, Amanda, you were way too ambitious. This timeline was way too ambitious." And yeah, but you know what? It sounds a little corny, but it was all a gift, all of it. Even the hardest days, I am thankful for, because it got me to this moment. And if you can sit with your feelings and you can treat yourself with kindness and be inquisitive, and why do you feel the way you feel? What preconceived notions makes you feel that way? And if you you know, both Matt's death and cancer gave me this unique period of time where society expected nothing from me. And that gave me the period of time to really do that self reflection and question so much of what I thought was true, and continue questioning till I was certain of what I felt. So I'm thankful because I have a wonderful life, and I still miss Matt. I love him. I you know, and I've had some interactions through mediums and stuff, which have been very interesting. But um, I still feel very connected. I went to Sedona in 2021 because I thought, or 2022, because I thought Dragonfly would be done by then. It wasn't. It wasn't about Dragonfly. It was about my own healing. And you know, it's yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm thankful for every up and every down and every loop to do loop de loo I was sent through.
Wow. Well, this is just the most amazing story. And certainly the highest level of healing is when you can find the gift in it and be grateful for it. So I just acknowledge you for that. That is such an incredible story, and just so
Well,
honored for you to share it. So thank you so much.
thank you. It's a testament to the power of Reiki, right? And that's what Dragonfly is.
Yeah.
Dragonfly is a way to spread the light, hope, and healing of Reiki to every corner of the world.
Yeah.
And
The power of
I make,
Reiki and the strength of your soul. And
yeah,
yes, absolutely. And I'm thinking that the Dragonfly Reiki could be especially good for new practitioners who are wanting to get out there and advertise their services, and particularly people that might want to do distance sessions and don't have an office. And, you know, it sounds like a better option than just posting your services on Etsy, which is what some of my Reiki students have done.
yeah, and that's exactly who it's set up for. Is that new? You know, like Pam, like for instance, Pam doesn't need Dragonfly. Her slots are full for weeks in advance. It's for that new practitioner who maybe only has the time to do 5 sessions a month and can't set up a whole business around it. It really is this idea that whatever Reiki these practitioners can share with the world, we want them to share with, and we any logistical hurdles that we could remove, we have tried to.
Well, that is so amazing. So that website again is dragonflyreiki.me. Are there any final words you want to say before we sign off for the evening?
No, I just thank you. It's gratitude changes everything, and so you know, I'm just incredibly thankful for the opportunity to be here. Incredibly thankful for the work the ICRT has done, and the manuals that it has provided that has just exponentially grown my understanding and my growth. And just the healing is worth it. It's hard. It's really hard. It's not all rainbows and lollipops. It gets dark and messy, and I had snot running down my face, crying more than once. But there is beauty and joy on the other side of that. And my life is a testament to that.
Wow, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That was a incredibly inspirational story, and I can't believe you were able to share it all without crying. I was like, oh my God, I have to cry listening to it.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Amanda, and give thanks to Pam LeBlanc for connecting us, and you know, gratitude to her also for her part in your healing story.
And also, just sorry, one last thing. So Dragonfly is also on Facebook. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can message me through Dragonfly Reiki Marketplace on Facebook. And I also have another open Facebook page called Amanda's Tango with Terminal Cancer, which I started to chronicle a lot. Like, I thought I was going to die, so I was chronicling my death, but it had a happier ending than anyone expected. So it's easy to reach me through either of those platforms.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Well, many
Thank you very much.
blessings, and thank you to
Thank you.
all of our listeners also for joining
Thank
us
you.
for this heartfelt story. So many blessings, and Reiki on for your business. Okay, good night.